There is a mini Quonset sitting on a dealer's lot right now that somebody paid $42,000 for 3 years ago. That same dealer would take $22,000 today, and the building still will not sell. If you have spent any real time researching affordable steel buildings, off-grid workshops, or covered storage solutions, you already know exactly what kind of structure this is. A mini Quonset. The half-circle ribbed steel shell that looks like someone sliced a grain silo in half and bolted it to the earth. The structure that was supposed to be the hard-working man's answer to everything. A personal workshop, a covered garage, a dry space for the tractor, the trailer, the tools that have been sitting in the weather for 3 seasons longer than they should have. For years, these things held their resale value better than most equipment in most sheds. That was completely true right up until about 18 months ago. By this season, used mini Quonset prices have dropped to numbers that would have seemed impossible back in 2022, and the dealers sitting on full inventory lots are quietly running low on patience and lower on cash flow. The smart buyers already know exactly why this is happening. Stay right here, because by the time this is over, you will know which mini Quonset to go after right now, which ones to walk straight away from, and why this specific moment may be the best buying opportunity this market has produced in a decade or longer. 3 years ago, none of this was true. Back in 2021 and 2022, anything that could give a man a private covered space was selling before the listing photos finished uploading. Mini Quonsets were moving off dealer lots and out of factory allocation lists at a pace the industry had never tracked before. Jack, a small farmer working land outside of Tennessee, called in a deposit on one without ever seeing it in person because the dealer told him the man ahead of him in the phone queue was about to take the last available unit. David, a contractor working jobs across Arizona, bought 2 of them inside the same calendar month, simply to have a covered location for materials, at a time when the supply chain was delivering everything 6 months behind schedule and at double the original quote. People were paying over asking price on steel buildings. Dealers who had been walking their lots for 20 years said they had never once seen a market move at that speed. And that exact frenzy is the reason you are looking at prices today that feel like they belong to a completely different market. Here is the first reason the floor fell out, and it is the one that nobody standing in a dealer's sales tent wants to be the first to say. The money got expensive. Almost nobody drives to a steel structure dealer with enough cash to buy a Quonset outright and write a check on the hood of their truck. Most people finance the purchase the same way they finance a truck, a piece of farm equipment, or a major shop tool. When interest rates were sitting near the floor, the monthly payment on a $30,000 Quonset was something a small business owner or a retired man on fixed income could absorb without breaking the budget. Then the rates climbed. That same loan, same structure, same weight of steel panels, started costing several $100s more every single month for absolutely nothing extra in return. The building does not get bigger, the clearance does not increase, the gauge of the steel does not change. You simply pay more money to borrow the exact same amount. Now think about who actually buys mini Quonsets. It is not large corporations writing checks from an operating budget. It is Adam, who runs a small landscaping crew out of 2 trucks and needs covered equipment storage that costs less than commercial warehouse rent. It is the retired man who finally has a piece of property where he can build the workshop he has been planning in his head since his 40s. These buyers calculated their numbers before they ever made the drive to the lot. When the monthly payment climbs by $200, they do not find a way to stretch. They stop answering the listings, stop driving out to look, and stop making offers. The dealer's phone goes quiet, and the inventory keeps stacking up. And then, the banks made it worse from the lending side. Some institutions began classifying portable and semi-permanent steel structures differently from traditional real estate or equipment. They shortened available loan terms. They required larger down payments to close. A portion of lenders stopped writing loans on certain Quonset configurations entirely because their underwriting teams could not settle on how to classify the asset for collateral. So the buyer who wanted the building, had solid credit, and showed up to the lot ready to sign, sometimes could not get the paper to close at all. When buyers disappear in volume, sellers have two choices: hold and wait or reduce the price. Right now, nearly every seller in this market is cutting, and every cut one seller makes sets a new ceiling for the seller standing right next to them. Rates and financing are only the first part of the story, because the second reason hit faster and reached wider than most people in this market are willing to say directly. Remember the frenzy? A significant number of those buyers had never owned a steel structure of any kind before that purchase. They bought because they needed somewhere productive to go, they had the land, and a check landing in their account made the down payment feel manageable. The idea of a private workshop or covered storage felt like a combination of freedom and practicality. Then life reopened, the money dried out, and reality arrived in a very specific way. A mini Quonset is not a storage unit where you hand over a card number once a month and forget about it until you need a box. It needs a proper foundation or compacted base installed correctly. It needs anchoring that meets manufacturer specifications, and in most counties, it has to meet local wind load requirements on top of that. When a panel works loose after a rough storm, the building needs you on a Saturday that was not in the plan. The shine wore off for a large portion of those buyers right around the time the first serious maintenance situation arrived, and the cost did not feel like freedom anymore. Those same structures are now coming back onto the used market all at once, in volume, at prices driven entirely by urgency. And every listing that comes back at a discount drags the price of the unit beside it down further. One panicked seller resets the number for the entire row. The third force hitting sellers is one the manufacturers are not publicizing. During the peak years, factories ramped production because demand looked like it had years of momentum remaining. They ordered raw steel forward. They added shifts. They expanded capacity. Then demand stalled almost overnight, and they were holding inventory they had already paid to produce. New units began competing directly with used units on price, and that dynamic does not belong in a healthy market. When a brand new mini Quonset with a manufacturer warranty is priced only a few $1,000s above a used unit with an unknown installation history, the used market does not soften. It collapses. Every used listing has to drop further to stay competitive with new steel, and dropping further is exactly what they are all doing right now. And the fourth factor has been quietly catching buyers off guard in a way most listing descriptions will never mention. Depending on your county, a mini Quonset installed without a proper building permit creates a legal situation that a simple, retroactive application will not resolve. Some counties require the structure to come down entirely if it was erected without approval. Others will block a property sale until the non-permitted structure is brought into compliance or removed. Buyers who are finding cheap listings and skipping the permit question before they close are sometimes purchasing a structure they cannot legally keep where it sits. Ask for permit documentation the same way you will ask for installation records. If it does not exist, make sure you fully understand your county's specific position on non-permitted structures before you assume the issue is minor or fixable. Here is the trap that catches most buyers in a crashed market at exactly the wrong moment. The purchase price on the listing is the beginning of the financial conversation, not the end of it. The foundation or base, done correctly to hold the structure as designed, adds several $1,000s before you ever install a single panel. The permit is a separate line item. Proper drainage management around the base is another. If you want electrical service inside, plan for an electrician and an additional permit. The annual maintenance on a properly built Quonset is genuinely manageable, and that reputation for durability has been earned over decades of real use. But the maintenance bill on one that was rushed into the ground without following installation specifications is a completely different number, and it compounds every season the underlying issues are not addressed. Water that gets through improperly sealed seams does not stop working once it is inside. It works on the steel, on the fasteners, and on everything stored in the building you bought specifically to protect your equipment in the first place. Jack ran this math before he made a serious offer on anything. He calculated that getting a used Quonset onto his property in genuinely working condition would cost considerably more than the listing price alone suggested. He adjusted his target purchase number downward to account for the realistic total and walked away from 4 listings that looked like deals until he ran the honest calculation. That thinking is the entire difference between the buyer who comes out of this market ahead and the one who buys someone else's problem at a slight discount. Now here is the part that actually determines whether a cheap listing is an opportunity or a mistake. There are 2 kinds of inexpensive mini Quonsets in this market right now. They can look nearly identical in a photograph, and they are entirely different buildings in person. The first is cheap because the previous owner made an honest decision that the structure did not fit his situation anymore. He moved. His business changed direction. He bought a larger property with an existing building already on it. That is a properly installed, carefully maintained Quonset you can put to work the week you take ownership. The second kind is cheap because something is genuinely wrong with it, and the seller already knows what that thing is. Here is how to tell one from the other before you move a single dollar. Ask for installation documentation. Any Quonset put up correctly will have records showing how the foundation was prepared, how the anchoring was done, and whether the installation followed manufacturer specifications or the local code requirement that applied. If the seller gets evasive when you ask for that paperwork, that hesitation is your answer. Examine the panel seams where the overlaps occur. Rust at the overlaps means water has been entering the structure, and water that has been inside long enough to produce visible rust has been working on the steel in ways you cannot see from the outside. Look at the base from all 4 sides. A structure that has shifted will show it in how the panels align at the bottom edge. Get low and actually look. Bring someone who understands steel construction, or spend a few $100s on a qualified inspection before you commit. That inspection cost is consistently the cheapest money in any steel building purchase. The repair bills on a problem you did not find first are never affordable. What you are looking for is the mini Quonset that is cheap, because Adam documented every step of the installation, anchored it properly, checked the seams each spring, ran his operation out of it for 4 clean years, and is selling it because his life moved in a different direction, not because the structure failed. That is a building someone else already proved works, available to you for a fraction of new construction cost. That is the actual deal this crash is handing to the buyer, patient enough to look carefully. What you walk away from every time is the listing that uses phrases like price to move, motivated seller, or needs the right buyer. Those phrases mean the seller already knows what is wrong and is betting you will not find it before the check clears. Misaligned panels, no installation records, rust at the base and seams, a seller who deflects every direct question about the build history. Walk away without exception. More listings go up every week, and the right one will still be there when you find it. The opportunity in this crash is real. It was built by interest rates that removed an entire category of buyer, a wave of frenzy purchases made by men who had no realistic ownership plan, manufacturers who overproduced into peak demand, permit complications that trapped owners in structures they could not legally transfer, and carrying costs that caught up with everyone who was stretched too thin all at roughly the same time. All of those forces are still working through the market. Prices may slide further before they find a floor, but they will find one, and the buyers who moved carefully in this window will own structures purchased at a fraction of what it will cost to replace them. Do not chase the lowest number on the listing. Find the Quonset a careful man installed correctly and is letting go of for honest reasons. Pay for the inspection, demand the permit and installation records, and let everyone else learn the expensive way. If this kind of content is useful to you, the kind that covers what the salesman is hoping never comes up in the conversation, subscribe. A new video goes up every single week. Do not miss the next one.